Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Guys, it is that time again. I can't even believe it's the end of this year already. This is going to be my hot takes on the transits for the astrology of November 2022. Hopefully you guys are doing well, thriving post some of these eclipses and like retrogrades and planet stationing. We are in a bit of a wild time as we're in between eclipses, coming out of the solar eclipse that we had at the end of October, still getting ready to have this lunar eclipse in Taurus that's going to be on the 8th. We've got a Mars retrograde that's in full effect. We have got all kinds of fixed squares, tons and tons of transits. So I'm not going to waste too much time getting into it. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a Western and evolutionary astrologer. I have an emphasis on working with tarot as well as combining the Sabian symbols and what I see clairvoyantly to make both global and personal predictions for the world and my viewers and my clients. Yeah, so just crazy stuff that's kind of going on all month long. This is going to be more the general kind of overview for the month. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, or if you want to note some of these transits in your own natal chart, please do so. We've also got horoscopes that are out, horoscopes for the month of November for all 12 rising signs, over 3 hours long. They're lengthy, but I take the most prominent transits for the month, talk about how it's going to be affecting each and every one of the 12 rising signs and giving just general insights into how this energy is going to feel. I want to remind you guys, I put it out a while ago, but there is also a lunar eclipse in Taurus video that's out there as well. So if you're like, what's next for the next eclipse? Check that out. You'll find that on my page. I usually put those out like a month early for you guys. Okay, so yeah, like I said, ton of planets that are going to be forming T-squares. We're going to see that happening just generally between all of these planets that are in Scorpio. And also Uranus in Taurus, and we're going to see squares to Saturn in Aquarius. So that'll be happening throughout the entire month, okay? So it's going to feel similar to the pressure that we saw in the month of January, February in Aquarius season, April going into May during Taurus season, July going into August during Leo season, and finally now we have the squares that are taking place in Scorpio. So the sun is in Scorpio for the first half of the month before going into Sagittarius. One thing that I want to note, and I do talk about this throughout the transits today, but I just want everybody to know that planets are going through Scorpio and they're touching on the south node, okay? So we're going to have lots of aspects and conjunctions between Venus, the sun, Mercury conjuncting the south node. When that happens, it's about a collective release, letting go, thinking about the past, dealing with the past. And Scorpio is a sign that's dealing with emotions, passion, fear, anything in regards to change and transition, transformation, other people's resources. So I think of like loans and taxes and money that's owed. And yeah, so that's going to be a theme that we're going to see pretty much all month long. And as these planets come into conjunction with the south node, which represents kind of what we're releasing or undoing, they are in opposition to the north node that is in Taurus. So some of the themes for like Scorpio season this month is going to be, oh, where do those energies come up? Where do we acknowledge them and make the decision to go, can't really be behaving that way, or we can't let fear get in the way, or we can't let jealousy or possessiveness get in the way. And there's a need to just kind of release, right? Venus going through the sign of Scorpio, so it is technically hanging out in its fall, so it's not as comfortable in a sign that is associated with conflict or endings or challenges, fear. Venus moving through this part of the sky is definitely suggesting that collectively we're all kind of clearing some of the stuff out and it's time for it to go. And all of these planets will then come into squares with Saturn. So there's a little bit of like letting go of the past, needing to do that. When planets conjunct the nodes, we're doing this on a collective level. And when planets square Saturn, it's time to go through that process, which can be uncomfortable. It can also be kind of riddled with some delays or some breakdown. And all of these planets are actually coming into the final 3/4 phase to Saturn in Aquarius. So now it's like the unwinding, right? If you think back to the beginning of this year, we had all these conjunctions in Aquarius, January, February, March. We saw them physically transform during Taurus season. We saw the drama play out during July and August season, or the realization of what we needed in our heart space, or what we were needing to kind of create or focus on a personal level for personal fulfillment. And now we have planets come into Scorpio, which does kind of make me feel as if anything that's not serving us, anything that's like lower vibration, anything that's toxic, bad habits, addictions, you know, shadow stuff that's coming up, like if it's not serving us, it's like detox season. So just so you guys get some more kind of insight into how that energy works. Whenever we see planets that are coming together in this formation, squaring like Saturn and, well, in this case, on November 1st, the moon, you're going to feel like there's this turning point. That's like, okay, do I keep going down the path of repeating all of these old habits or these old patterns, or are we still telling ourselves the old stories? Or are we choosing to go collectively more towards kind of the future? Obviously, planets in Scorpio, eclipses in Scorpio, eclipses in Taurus, these are very financial. So Taurus deals more with like banking, our own personal wallets and checkbooks, and the 8th house deals with like mortgages, lending, loans, taxes. So we're going to hear a lot of stuff that's coming up about not having enough, right? Not having enough, or fear revolving around shortages. And then we're going to see planets that are coming into a square with Saturn. So it's going to literally be about how collective leaders, Saturn, governments are dealing with stuff that's going on in regards to like debts and loans. Just some stuff that I've been seeing like recently in the internet. Like came across a video yesterday or today that was like somebody who goes and they're purchasing like houses and cars and things that are like either being foreclosed, or, you know, people who had to kind of give up vehicles as a result of not being able to pay on their auto loans, like masses of cars basically that are being turned over, unfortunately, as a result of just not being able to make ends meet, not being able to pay the payments. And people who are going to some of these auctions basically being like, you're about to see just a ton of houses on the market, a ton of cars on the market, used cars, and other things, because people can't afford it. And so I think we're going to hear more about people defaulting on mortgages and loans and higher interest rates, unfortunately, throughout this process. So I will tell everybody, I'm not a financial advisor. That's not really my spiel. But definitely with some of these conjunctions to the South Node, it's like becoming aware of where we can no longer continue to fund something, or where we get denied for the extension, for the payment, where we get denied for a higher kind of credit card limit. Like there's going to be less and less resources. Still in the middle of the Saturn-Uranus square, although now Saturn is direct, so you're going to feel that kind of easing up after mid-month. But it's going to pack a punch with that eclipse, because we're going to see Saturn square that lunar eclipse in Taurus. So I think that we will see more delays, more shortages. You know, Scorpio deals with like oil, and it can also deal in some sense with aspects to Neptune, to gasoline. So I've also been hearing like this stuff that's going on with like diesel. We've got like less than a month supposedly of diesel. And what happens if that runs out? You know, we're coming into the holiday season, and I'm wondering, is this a scare tactic, or is this something that's like a real problem, which will create further supply chain issues, right? I'm not the only astrologer who has thought that we were going to see more of this. It was pretty clear with the writing on the wall that as planets move through Scorpio and they score Saturn, it's going to represent where we need more, and people might be like panic buying, and we might see more issues with people trying to kind of snatch stuff up because they're feeling like there isn't enough. So we might actually see that with oil and gasoline, and also with food, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get into the month ahead. Okay, so the month is going to kick off on the 2nd, and we're gonna see on the 2nd that Venus is coming into conjunction with the South Node at 13 degrees of Scorpio. Now, why is this important? Obviously, like I said, planets conjunct the South Node represent a collective release or letting go. There is positive sides to the South Node, like we can hear from the past, deal with the past. There can also be a sense of like tuning into something past life related or something that's familiar, or tapping into just like a natural talent that we have with that South Node. The challenge here is that Venus is going to go through kind of like a bit of a gauntlet, okay? First, the conjunction to the South Node, and this relates to the Moon. Venus conjunct the South Node, we see like a breakdown in Venus-related things, relationships, specifically financial relationships, sexual relationships, because it's in the sign of Scorpio, and Venus is already kind of in her fall. The positive, because I want to see the silver lining, is that what we'll see the second going into the third is that the Moon in Pisces, which is relating to the nodes, is going to trine the South Node and Venus, and it's also going to come into a sextile with the North Node and Uranus. So even though on the 2nd and the 3rd of November, we are going to experience like, oh, that has to go, or this is not healthy for me, or this is not a healthy behavior. Scorpio is very emotional. There is a gentle emotional release that we're going to have with the Moon. So if you're feeling that on the 2nd or the 3rd, stay hydrated, drink water, take baths, spend time in nature, meditate, reflect, and take a little bit of time alone to like grieve the loss of something. It doesn't always have to be like a person or a relationship. It can be being like, okay, I had to make that, cut with the lifestyle, and it's scary. I don't know how to do it, and it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to give myself a little bit of, compassion and be a little bit more gentle with myself as I go through this process and allow myself to process the emotions. Most likely everybody is going to feel that to some extent. This is just the beginning of, like I said, Venus's gauntlet, because after she goes through the South Node, she is going to then come into an opposition with Uranus and square Saturn. One thing I also want to note is when planets touch on the South Node, it's in theory opposing the North Node. And the North Node in astrology is talking about where we're wanting to go collectively for soul growth. The South Node is like, we can get stuck there, it can become too comfortable, we can fall back into it. So we're gonna get tested in the week ahead with like, oh my God, do I have enough money? Are they cheating on me? Like what's really going on? Like there can be some like unwillingness to kind of open up to love, and some fear revolving around relationships and finances and commitment. So you want to watch for those pitfalls because it's guaranteed. I think Venus conjunct the South Node in itself would have done that. But as it conjuncts the South Node, opposes the North Node, which is saying, hi, if you get stuck here, you can't really move towards the future, right? And the North Node in Taurus is like feeling secure in your body, like feeling good in your skin, feeling grounded, connected with nature. I would advise you guys to acknowledge when these feelings come up, but find ways to kind of ground yourself out and come back to your body. So that way you're not just kind of like tuning out and becoming disassociated with whatever or whoever is kind of in your space. Then we will see that Venus will come into opposition with Uranus, which is like shocking, and it'll be that, okay, this is how I'm responding to the separation or cutting the bad habit, and then it will square Saturn. So maybe Venus conjuncting the South Node wouldn't be as kind of like active, but I think that it's just we're getting kind of dinged with all of these T-squares where we've got an opposition between these two planets, which can represent tension, and oppositions are relational, so it does involve other people. And then the T-square, the focal point being Saturn in Aquarius, is now direct. So Saturn is basically saying, no, you have to show up, you have to do the work through some of this karmic stuff, apply yourself even though it's uncomfortable, really commit to your friends, your goals, your future, right? What it is that you're wishing for, and you have to be really connected to that in order to kind of navigate some of these uncomfortable emotional and physical changes. Okay, so that'll be the 2nd and the 3rd. And we'll see, like I said, that moon trine that's going to be happening more so on the 3rd. The moon will come into conjunction with Neptune, which is also very sensitive over that entire day, really going into the 4th. And it'll create a square to Mars, so we can feel a little kind of like mixed up and confused with what direction we're going in. Mars will be retrograde clear until January, so I don't really have anything new to tell you other than a couple trines we're going to see this month and another square to Neptune. But you may want to observe what's going on the 3rd when the Moon and Neptune and Jupiter are all starting to kind of come together, squaring Mars, where we just have some confusion in terms of our emotions or our feelings. Okay, so now I want to take you guys to the 5th. And on the 5th, we're going to see then the Sun is going to come into conjunction with the South Node. A loss of power, a loss of something, getting disconnected or unplugged. You know, the Sun South Node in a natal chart can also be somebody who has like a lot of charisma, and they can have like a lot of warmth and a lot of personality traits that relate to what sign it's in from a past life. So when we see this in transit, you know, the Sun South Node is kind of like, okay, we might see like a significant male figure step down in some way. We might see something come out in regards to like scandal or corruption of power, or money, or, you know, kind of like hidden communication. And that's because of all the planets that are in Scorpio conjuncting the South Node and then coming into this like gnarly T-square. But South Node Sun, we might hear somebody stepping down, a CEO stepping down, a significant, you know, person, man, or somebody in power that's losing power, giving power away, losing their vitality, or transitioning in some way. That is possible. Same day, we see some uncomfortable angles between the Moon in Aries and all this Scorpio, and that's a whole lot of Mars energy that's trying to reconcile something. So yeah, likely there will be something that will happen with that transit. Same day, Venus comes into opposition with Uranus. Now, like I said, Venus being the ruler of the North Node, we want to see what Venus is doing. Not happy in Scorpio, kind of dealing with some fear issues, some pain, manipulation. The darker side of love is what we can see, like the horrors and the reality of love and relationships. And Venus will come into an opposition with Uranus. So here it's like a sudden changes of fortune can happen. You know, Venus being in the sign of Scorpio and also Uranus being in the sign of Taurus, neither one of these planets are entirely too happy in these signs. And we're going to be feeling the square to Saturn. So like financial transactions, like doing some sudden kind of like betting everything on one particular number, putting all of the money on one horse, taking a risk in the market. Like these are things you do not want to do with the Venus South Node conjunction, with the Venus Uranus opposition, with Venus square Saturn. Like do me a favor, guys, any financial transactions, it's kind of better off waiting until Venus is at least getting into like the trine to Jupiter. Or perhaps when we get Venus that's coming into Sagittarius. So not a time to take risks unless you're willing to potentially experience a loss. And that's with money, relationships, values, all of that stuff, pretty much the whole first half of November. I do see these days that it's like there can be upsets in the markets. There can be also like suddenly we find out like, oh my God, you know, this money went missing, or there's like a hack in a card, or there's something like that that just seems weird. Because Uranus and Taurus deals with like digital exchanges, and it also can deal with like money on the internet. I'm wondering what's going to happen here in terms of like some big news about a financial platform and some kind of unexpected twist or turn that happens with the markets. Venus won't be happy though, I'll tell you that, because it is happening at a Leo degree, so it makes me feel like it's going to definitely affect younger people. It's definitely going to be a day where if you're somebody who is like a younger trader, or you've been maybe really lucky with things and like you kind of push your luck, it may not pan out the way that you think it's going to go. Relationships can have more turbulence, that's the truth. But I have seen in some situations in a well aspected chart, it can be like all of a sudden there's a breakthrough and there was resources there that weren't there or weren't expected, right, out of the blue. So it really is going to depend on your own personal chart. But for the world, not the easiest opposition that's going to be taking place. All right, so then we're going to take this to the 6th. And on the 6th, we're going to see Mercury in Scorpio conjunct the South Node. So you're going to see all these planets, like I said, come conjunct the South Node. First, Venus, where we're letting go of anything that doesn't feel good. Then the Sun, where we're releasing the power, the need to control. Then we have Mercury, where it's like, okay, well, now the truth is going to come out, or now we're finally going to talk about it. It can be a sense of feeling, because Mercury deals with minds, of like losing our minds. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this information. This is absolutely insane. All the while, we're building up to the eclipse on the 8th, okay? So knowing here in the United States that we're getting ready to have our midterm elections, I anticipate it's just gonna be a hot mess, to be honest with you, okay? The country is super divided, but these oppositions and squares also talk about some kind of division and nobody really being happy, and like lots of information coming out that may not be so pretty, because Mercury in Scorpio wants to get deep. It wants to kind of uncover things, or it wants to expose things. So like leading up right to the elections, yeah, there's just going to be some crazy stuff that's going to start coming out that might be exposing stuff in regards to like crimes, especially with like finances, or things that might be of like a more sexual nature. Mercury South Node can be like this feeling that we get news, and the news is so wild that it's like it takes your breath away and you can't breathe. And you're like, oh my God, what is this? And that energy will continue as it opposes Uranus and it squares Saturn. So there can be things that come out and you're like, I don't know if I believe that, or I can't accept that. And then as we're coming into the eclipse in mid-month, it'll be like, oh my gosh, this is wild. So I think, Mercury's the mind. So the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all conjunct in Scorpio. It's like a lot of people are talking about what they lost, what they're grieving, what they had to let go of. Like they're concerned about their ability to have financial support, or where they've had to make cutbacks, or where they've had to let something go. So that'll be the talk of the town, basically, the whole real first week of November in general. This same day, Venus comes into a square with Saturn in Aquarius. So once again, not an easy place for Venus. She's already gone through a loss. She's gone through a startling realization with an opposition to Uranus. And then she comes into a square with Saturn. So I'm wondering like if this is how governments are coming forward and talking about like what they're going to do to better support the masses and groups of people who are worried or scared, South Node and Scorpio, about whether or not there's going to be enough of something. 18 degrees makes me a little nervous, because that definitely deals with health or the service industry, animals, anything in regards to like Virgo energies. So I'm kind of feeling like definitely not the easiest when it comes to news coming out about those industries, or some health leak or release that comes out, or anything that just kind of deals with like the health of the economy. It doesn't even necessarily need to be about bodies per se. This degree is very familiar. If you guys remember, we had the planets that went through Leo during the end of July going into August that were in a square to both the North Node and Uranus at 18 degrees. So anytime we see this degree come up in the fixed signs, it's kind of reigniting that conjunction that we had at the end of summertime. So yeah, definitely a day to be the most cautious with finances and exchanges in general, relating to, money and that kind of stuff. Because Venus square Saturn is like, didn't get the check on time, the funds didn't clear, was too late making the payment, didn't get the money in on time, so therefore couldn't catch, some stock price when it drops. It's like timing, and there's delays. Can also be much more difficult just in terms of like health in general. So just a word to the wise, watch for that. Now I'm going to take you guys to the 8th, and this will be the day of the lunar eclipse in Taurus. Now the lunar eclipse will be at 16 degrees and change. Not exact, but pretty darn close. We're going to have that moon conjunct Uranus. The moon's happy in Taurus, conjunct Uranus, very wild, destabilizing. Taurus rules food, the markets, the earth, anything in regards to personal pleasure and personal banking. So when the moon comes into this conjunction, we're going to see something wildly kind of taking place that needs to happen, because it's affecting our future, or anything in regards to our collective future. So this eclipse really is going to affect everyone. I've talked about the eclipse path. If you haven't seen it, I would Google it. You're going to see it's going to affect pretty much everything, pretty much everyone. This is going to be a total lunar eclipse, and that's important because total eclipses have much more of an impact. Just energetically, they're very potent. So this is a full moon on steroids. We've got the planets all in Scorpio, including the sun, and the moon will make this opposition. So the moon is happy in Taurus usually in this situation. And I've said this in my video, I've said this in this last month during the horoscopes. It's like, even I'm a bit kind of like big question marks, you know? When I follow like my method of breaking down a transit or an eclipse, you know, I look for the ruler, or I look for how that lunation is kind of placed. So an exalted moon is great. Conjunct Uranus is destabilizing, in opposition to Venus in Scorpio, and its fall is like feeling like something's out of reach or it's not getting enough. Then we have got the moon, which is going to be in a square to Saturn. And because this is a T-square, technically Saturn is supposed to be the focal point. But it's like, where do you go? You know, Saturn's the focal point. You got a eclipse that's in one sign and its ruler is in the opposite sign. This is the embodiment of all of the Saturn-Uranus square energy that we've had for 2 years. And this may be finally like where the bottom falls out. Something pops and it goes kaboom. So you want to look at where Taurus is in your chart. But to be honest with you, this is kind of spelling out like real economic, financial disaster. And I'm not saying this to kind of like be, you know, a fearmonger, but be very, very careful with how you're spending, what you're eating, anything in regards also to your nervous systems, because this is conjunct Uranus and Taurus. So vibrations and frequencies and things that we're eating, like it's so important to be aware of what's in your environment and then what you're putting in your body and the clothes that you're wearing, or the materials that you're working with, the food that you're eating, the supplements that you're taking, what's around you energetically, you know, vibrationally. So there can be massive shakes and shakeups that happen literally or figuratively with this eclipse. Obviously, listen to that video. I'm going to take you through all the 12 signs. I talk about it in the horoscopes too, so if you want to listen, you can, but there's a whole video dedicated to it to kind of talk to you about where there's been tension between Taurus and also Aquarius really for like the last 2 years, as we've seen the Saturn-Uranus squares going on off and on really since 2021. But with so many planets that are in Scorpio, Sun, Mercury, Venus, we're now going to see the emotional fallout that happens as a result of physical changes in the markets and in banking, and whether or not we have some assistance or somebody or something steps in to course correct it. See, Saturn has been kind of like having a lasso on Uranus the last 2 years, kind of holding it back and keeping it from just going buck wild. And my concern is that when this eclipse happens, because it's conjunct Uranus, the collective moon Uranus is going to go kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because they're going to be like, these are the physical changes. So it can be people reacting to major financial kind of upheaval, supply chain issues, shortages, you know, energy problems, electric issues, problems with the internet. I mean, these things are very, very, very expected. And I'm expecting malfunctions, because this is going to be an eclipse that's in opposition to Mercury. So having cash so you don't potentially have to go to an ATM, having some extra food so you're not worried about having to go to the grocery store for a couple days, having some, you know, your car fully filled up. These are things that you just want to do prior to this eclipse. I've said this in previous videos. Obviously, we never really know where it's going to hit, but I was saying this before we had some of the ATM shortages that happened in Canada. So, you know, like I said, it's going to vary on a place-by-place basis, but this eclipse is really affecting pretty much every continent on the map. More for that, check out that video. Same day, we're going to see that there is a Sun-Mercury cazimi. So during the eclipse, Mercury and the Sun are conjunct, and then Mercury is going to pull ahead. Very interesting, considering it's happening on eclipse and Mercury is going to be in opposition to the moon. I anticipate if it's not financial, it's definitely relating to the housing market. You might see more in regards to like farmers, also stuff in regards to farmers and land, or we might hear about like a really significant like natural phenomenon, like, you know, an earthquake or something like that that could happen. That's definitely going to make headlines around the world, and we're going to hear about it as Mercury pulls ahead of the Sun. Now, with this conjunction, it's about uncovering something and being aware of something and like some kind of truth coming out or something coming out that you weren't aware of before. really special kind of coincidental day where you'll just see little sparkles from Mercury and you'll get some insight about something that you were not aware of before. So look for that. And also you're going to see Mercury in opposition to Uranus. So it's going to be like anxiety maybe higher, right? Spidey senses might be a little bit more sensitive, and there's this feeling of like bracing for impact. Anything you can do to support the nervous system during this time is really important, and be listening to your intuition and know that with Mercury in Scorpio, it can be really difficult differentiating the difference between, is this my intuition talking or is this fear? Have I been programmed to just be on high alert all the time and be waiting for the next crisis, or am I really tuned into something? And the truth is you're not going to know unless you're really grounding your energy out and like learning to not just respond to whatever's going on out in the world. We're already in the eclipse energy, but it is going to be the most, I think, intense the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th of the month. Okay, so it'll play on for a couple days. And eclipses don't always hit right during the day of the eclipse. It can be 2 weeks before, it can be a month later. By the time we're getting to the end of November, likely you're going to see this energy play out, but it is going to be quite complex really all the way up until mid-month. Okay, so then we go to the November 9th. Sun in Scorpio oppose Uranus. So you're going to hear a lot of the same stuff. Sorry guys, I know I sound like a broken record, but the Sun and Uranus will be in an opposition early in the day. This is an unexpected anything goes day, so things can turn over. Sun opposed Uranus makes me feel like when you think something's going to go left, it's going to go right. It is hard to deal with situations during these days because things feel out of your control, or they feel like you have no say in the matter, or you know, stuff that's kind of beyond you, and people can definitely be more rebellious and more unexpected. So delays in schedules, people canceling, you know, stuff just literally being out of your control is going to happen. Not the easiest 2-day period, the 9th and the 10th, between the opposition with Uranus and also the square to Saturn. So these are days where you're going to see more breakdown. Mercury also in Scorpio starts forming a square to Saturn. And this is where I think that it's like a lot of, oh, my schedule fell apart, or, oh, you know, there's traffic and I got delayed, or, you know, somebody just totally, you know, canceled something. Difficulty communicating, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions, I think, with Mercury opposed Uranus. And then with Mercury square Saturn, it can be some difficult news, delivering some difficult news or having some difficult conversations. Not the easiest energy to be trying to like negotiate and wheel and deal. I tell clients, like, you know, during eclipses, we don't want to be like getting married, having surgeries, moving house, signing big, you know, contractual agreements, because there's something that's not clear. So I would wait maybe until we start seeing like Mercury coming into a trine with Jupiter, or maybe we start seeing just the moon that's going to be in better aspect to some of the planets as well. You'll also see all these planets in Scorpio later in the month start coming into a sextile with Pluto, and that might be a better time to kind of, you know, agree to something with someone. Okay, so then on the 10th, we're going to see Venus in Scorpio trine Neptune in Pisces. So it'll be happening, yeah, earlier, late in the evening on the 9th going into the 10th. But Venus trine Neptune, romantic, whimsical, releasing, sensitive, sentimental, healing, spiritual, all that fun stuff. So to see Venus and Neptune in positive aspect to each other, finally Venus is making some more decent moves. The issue that I'm seeing here is that Venus is still in its fall, and also we're still feeling some friction because the moon and Mars are going to be in Gemini in conjunct Venus. So this tells me that like there's a need to come out with something, talk about something, say something, have those difficult conversations that we may not feel comfortable doing. And we've got the future ruler, Venus, at odds with the South Node ruler, the past, and they're creating an inconjunct or a quincunx to each other. So difficult conversations are likely to come up. There's a need to kind of work through that and like communicate accordingly, even if it feels uncomfortable. Then we go to the 11th, and on the 11th, we're going to see Sun in Scorpio is going to come into a square with Saturn. Now that'll be earlier in the day, so you'll see it earlier in the day, but 18 degrees square. So the Sun square Saturn is challenges, upheaval, challenges with energy, feeling blocked, or that something is like thwarted in some way. You guys see what I'm saying when I talk about all these planets going through Scorpio? Like, really, until all these planets come out of an opposition with Uranus, where we've seen things kind of wildly play out, we see the squares to Saturn, where we see like the karmic repercussion for things. Literally the whole first 2 weeks of November, like things that go on can have long-term karmic effects. Like, you can make decisions, there can be purchases or endings or relocations or things that happen that literally change the trajectory of the rest of your life, because it's all going to square Saturn. By the same token, there can be things that end, or there can be delays or breakdowns, but it's happening because it may be things that have to break down, especially as it's coming into the third quarter square with Saturn. That's like things that have to be cleared out. That can be scary or really emotional, but it has to happen in order for us to get to where we need to go. Okay. Then we have, things get easier from the 14th on, I'll say that. On the 12th, Mercury also comes into a trine with Neptune. And as Mercury and Neptune trine, it's a really great day for like tarot readings, astrology readings, meditation, journaling. There may be some really strong insights that you have in a dream, or maybe like a breakthrough that you have emotionally or psychologically. That helps you heal. That's the other way that I could see this. Planets are still in conjunct Mars, but it might mean that there is some kind of healing or remedy in some of these difficult conversations that need to be had. Then on the 13th, we have Venus in Scorpio come into a sextile with Pluto in Capricorn. So this is where Venus starts to get a little bit kind of better aspected. So Venus sextile Pluto, going deep, being able to get clear about what we need for our resources, what we need for healing, what we need for more authentic, connected, committed relationships. We're also going to watch Venus start coming into a trine with then Jupiter, and that'll be over the next couple of days. On the November 14th, we see Mercury then in Scorpio come into a sextile with Pluto. I could see this be people talking about like, okay, this is what happened. Like, how do we transform? How do we rebuild? And like really getting to the core of, you know, our fears, or where things have kind of been misrepresented, or like where there was some breakdown. This very same day, we are also going to see the Sun in Scorpio come into a trine with Neptune. So a very inspirational day on tap. Very spiritual, once again, great for meditation, but this is also like feeling like we're in direct alignment with our glory plan. Like, oh, maybe this happened so that could take place, or like maybe this is my purpose, and you're feeling kind of like more enlightened as a result of some of the difficult things that have been going on earlier in the month. Venus starts coming into its trine with Jupiter, but that's going to be playing out more so closer to the 16th. I take that back. That's the Mercury trine. So here we go, the 15th. So on the 15th, Venus is going to trine Jupiter. Probably one of the better aspects that we're going to be seeing with Venus while Venus is in Scorpio. You know, we see this trine happen twice throughout the year. Big opportunities in love, in relationships, in money, in resources. But I've thought all along that all these planets moving through Scorpio with the South Node is about change and transformation of values, of how we think, how we communicate with other people, and the breakthroughs that we have spiritually, psychically, empathically. And it can also be about, you know, expressing grief or mourning. You know, I've noticed with these trines to both Jupiter and Neptune in the same sign, collective sadness, more compassion, more opportunities for peace and for healing, but it may not be your typical Venus-Jupiter trine, okay? Because these are in water signs. So it's talking more about emotions, so emotional breakthroughs, feeling like you've hit the lottery emotionally, but that's because you finally forgave someone, you finally kind of put something to rest, and you learn to let something go. And these are happening in signs that deal with actual endings, right? So the water houses are about kind of saying goodbye to someone or something and letting it pass. Then also on the 15th, we will see just shortly after this trine, Venus will move into Sagittarius. So it's going to move into the mutable fire sign where it needs more freedom and expansiveness. It loves culture. It loves travel. And we're going to see a very different side of Venus moving into a fire sign, which is going to be a lot more active. On the 16th, Mercury in Scorpio will trine Jupiter in Pisces, and I feel like good news is possible. Maybe it'll come on the 15th, but this is good news, positive news, you know, something in regards to expansion, maybe travel, spiritual insights, stuff like that. So I do feel like that's when the energies start to kind of turn over, like I said, right around mid-month. If you are somebody who is a Mercury ruled chart, you know, it might be good for you in terms of travel or just having some good news that you're wanting to kind of put out into the world. On the 17th, Mercury then follows suit and also enters into Sagittarius, where it will be in its fall. So generally we like to see Mercury in Gemini or in Virgo, but Mercury in Sag has a tendency to kind of really blow certain headlines out of the water and expand things and make things bigger. So I could see with that ingress and also Mercury and Venus coming together that there is some big news that's coming out about global markets. There is some potentially overly inflated good news about how good things could be or how much better things could be. But overall, Mercury and Venus together is kind of a funky energy because Mercury wants to like dissect and break things down or separate things. And it can be also about like analytics or projection. It can also be about communication. So Venus and Mercury being in a sign that's traditionally ruled by Jupiter makes me feel like there may be good news in the realm of having more freedom or being able to communicate more freely. So I'm curious to see how that plays out just in light of some of these new things that are going on with people buying up new social networks. But that might be a day where we hear some interesting stuff. Then on the 18th, the Sun in Scorpio is going to come into a sextile with Pluto. So we see the ability to shine a light in the dark. Sun in Scorpio highlight an area where there is something that is transforming. And the sextile to Pluto is the power that we have. You know, it's like we're researching something, we're looking at something, we're strategizing, even for the end of the year, where we're going business-wise or what we're doing in terms of like our ability to control or schedule or kind of like time something. That's the other way that I would look at it. The next day we have on the 19th, this is going to be Mars retrograde in Gemini coming into a square with Neptune in Pisces at 22 degrees, okay? So I don't know about you. I mean, I sometimes with Neptune transits, I don't feel them as much. And then other times I'm like totally sidelined. So it's going to differ person to person, but you want to look back at October 11th and October 12th of this year. Okay, so just a couple weeks ago. That was the very first time we saw Mars and Neptune square. Mars in Gemini, which is like speeding up the mind and communication and learning and anything in regards to social media, documents, language. In a square with Neptune kind of says like we're acting very quickly or speaking very quickly before we have clarity or before we have a sense of like direction. So lower energy levels, lower vitality can sometimes happen with this square. Low visibility due to storms or rushing or overlooking something. And that's something you guys want to watch for. But now that Mars is retrograde, it's basically like reworking or re-examining a blind spot and being like, okay, how do we work through this blind spot? Like, how do we, cut through this and gain more clarity? Know that more clarity will be coming through Sag season as planets move through Sagittarius and they start coming into an opposition with Mars and square Neptune, where we may start to question a certain narrative in relation to law, travel, rights of some kind, documents, information, data, especially pertaining to social media platforms. But for right now, lower energy kind of period, and you may see some fuzziness and issues also with like honesty, and there can be sometimes deception or withholding information or withholding documents or something that was said in the past. So we can be revisiting certain conversations and trying to get clarity in some way. We will see that happen one more time, and that's going to happen closer to March of 2023, and that will be when Mars is direct. But with both Mars and Neptune retrograde, this might feel like extremely confusing and very difficult finding the words and being able to kind of communicate and talk about taking an action plan. When Mars is retrograde, also there can be more frustration, and we can have like more anger that can come up and resentment that can come up. And I think with the square to Neptune, it can come out of the blue unexpectedly, or we can just find that we're just a little bit more passive aggressive also during this time. On the 20th, you're going to see that the Sun in Scorpio is going to come into a trine with Jupiter in Pisces. Not a bad day on tap. That tells me that there's opportunities for positive changes, emotional breakthroughs, some kind of clearing that's happening, especially like globally. And being a little bit more open and alert and sensitive to our own intuitions. And so this can be a turning point at the end of November that's like, man, my intuition was telling me this, and like there it is. So you might want to look for that. But Sun trine Jupiter days are generally pretty positive and a little bit more optimistic. However, during that period, we have the moon that is coming into the balsamic phase as we're getting ready to set up for a new moon in Sagittarius a couple days later. On the 21st, Mercury will conjunct Venus exactly, and that will be at 7 degrees. So it's definitely about relationships, balance, harmony, partners, law, any of those things. So watch for that. Once again, still decent news, but I'm kind of getting the feeling that it can be something that's inflated. It can almost seem like too good to be true. But still, you got to take your wins when you can. Having Venus out of Scorpio is great. And I think we're going to have a nice little sweet spot as we see planets in Sagittarius start sextiling Saturn before they're squaring off with Neptune and Jupiter again. Then on the 22nd, the Sun enters into Sagittarius. So happy birthday to my November Scorpios and my November Sagittariuses. If your birthday's prior to the 22nd, happy birthday, Scorpios. But this is when it becomes Sagittarius season. So the Sun moving into Sag, and with so many planets in Sag, and then we'll have a new moon in Sag. It's super Saggy, very active, the bigger picture, the high ground, philosophy, beliefs, travel, all of these things are going to be highlighted. Lots of news in regards to global events. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting with all of these transits. It's not unusual to see Venus and Mercury always move very close to the Sun, but what we're going to see is that with that new moon in Sag that's coming in, all of those planets are going to be kind of closely tied to it. So that does seem to kind of suggest it's part of what's going to be talked about or worked on during that whole entire lunar cycle from the end of November all the way until December. Then on the 23rd, and I really want to make a point of saying this. It's not often that I overlook something, but I definitely overlooked something. And it was my bad, because when I was doing the horoscopes, I was writing out the notes and I was putting in the date and then the degrees. And I let you guys just know like the new moon and the full moon. So you guys know that the lunar eclipse, the full moon, is going to be on the 8th, and it's at 16 degrees of Taurus. I made a mistake. I told you guys that the new moon was on the 23rd, which is correct. It is on the 23rd, and it is in Sagittarius, but it's at 1 degree of Sag. So I'm going to keep saying that. I'll say it in my weeklies, and I'll let you guys know also when I do the video. So if you guys heard 23 degrees, it's on the 23rd. It's 1 degree of Sag. So I apologize, but yeah. So we're going to have a new moon in Sagittarius at 1 degrees. It is going to be in conjunction, like I said, to both Venus and Mercury. So if you are a Taurus rising, a Libra rising, a Virgo rising, a Sag rising, a little bit more prominent for you guys because it is kind of working with Gemini too, Gemini rising. It's working with your guys' rulers. And I think that this is going to be like trying to spread the word of togetherness and coming together and banding together, and a lot of information and news coming out about what's going on globally. And I'm not going to say peace, because peace really isn't the word. It's about supporting other nations or supporting other countries, and also what's going on with like other newses. So, you know, just me personally living in the United States, it's always fascinating to like see what's going on in the rest of the world and seeing how what's happening in other countries is generally not on the news for us. So a lot of Americans get a bad rap for being uninformed, but quite literally, we're getting our information through the platforms that are being put out there. So there's probably going to be a lot more talk about like hearing news about what's going on in other countries and then being like, whoa, what's happening? Especially countries that might be more associated with Sagittarius in general. Okay, so I think of like Australia, South America, parts of Canada, you know, like Spain. We might hear about some of these places a little bit more. But new moons, time to set new intentions, and I like the fact that Venus is involved, so it's definitely going to be a little bit sweeter. And it's the sweet spot where planets are sextiling Saturn pretty soon, not quite in a square or in opposition to Mars. So things get so much easier closer to the third week of November. It's not even funny. Like you'll see the energy kind of ease up a little bit. On the 28th, so we're going to skip a couple days, because there's not too much going on. Mercury and Venus will move with each other. But on the 28th, this is when we start to see some shenanigans. That's what I'm going to call it. There's some shenanigans. So this is a day to watch because this will be the second time that Mars in Gemini will trine Saturn. And it's an important day because the Moon and Saturn are going to come together. So look back at September 27th and September 28th. This was when Mars was in shadow, and it was when it was trining Saturn. Mars is the motivation, the direction, the drive, walking the walk, talking the talk in Gemini, and it's in a trine to Saturn and the Moon. So you're going to see an opportunity to like communicate, go back, rehash something. There's karmic stuff going on, stuff with the collective, things with friends and our goals, and like needing to kind of really sink into that. And that's where I really want you guys to focus. It's like if you need to call a friend or somebody who can kind of assist you, if you need to go back and really reevaluate your goals, recommit to something, do it. Because this same very day, we're going to see Mercury and Sagittarius coming into an opposition with Mars and Gemini. So that's kind of argumentative, conflicting energy where somebody shares their idea, their philosophy, their belief system, and somebody else is like, you know, arguing or yelling, you know, or getting aggressive with Mars retrograde. And we're also seeing Venus coming into that conjunction as well. So the way that you want to use the energy on the 28th is when working with other people or sharing your philosophy or your religious beliefs or your view on life in general. We want to be accepting and understanding of other people's perspectives, even if we do not agree. So it's about kind of finding that middle ground and learning to like accept everybody in their own unique individual way and not challenge or argue things, because there can be like this really kind of sagely, saggy energy with all these planets in the skies where people are going to be arguing about religion. They're going to be arguing about philosophy. They're going to be arguing about like law. And like the truth is that just these planets alone in opposition to Mars retrograde, to me, seems like it's just like total debate energy. But with all the squares to the planets that are in Pisces, it's like getting lost in like the conflict and people arguing about something and then not really realizing like what's going on in the world while everybody's just behind their keyboards, just going at kind of debating something. So don't get lost in that if you can help it. Really lean on these trines and reflect on what it means to kind of come together and respect people for their own individual beliefs or goals, philosophy, whatever. Then on the 29th, we're going to see Venus starts coming into the opposition. The Mercury opposition really is perfecting still into the 29th. But we're going to see that we're going to have Mercury in a sextile to Saturn. So perhaps maybe like a little bit of friction can be good because it makes us realize like what the bigger picture is and like what we're committing to and like who our real friends are. And I like that Sag and Aquarius are very like intellectual signs. You know, Aquarius is going to be more detached and like letting people think their own thing. And then all the Sagittarius energy is going to be like what is possible and like trying to teach and educate other people. But once again, still, we're starting to lose the positive aspects and we're starting to see things that are going to be forming squares to Neptune. So Mercury square Neptune, which will play out closer to the end of November, beginning of December, is, you know, misinformation, miscommunication. Venus square Neptune, it can be misplaced emotions and feelings, especially relating to money or relationships. And then the oppositions to Mars is really messy mutable squares. So be mindful that there is going to definitely be a lot of issues in regards to agreeing with other people about, like, they're either their religious or you know, their philosophies or their, you know, their belief systems in general. We're going to hear a lot of stuff about, like, religion. It's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, and culture and clashes that are happening. Then we have on the 30th, the Venus-Mars opposition perfects. So this is interesting because Venus in Sag is so fun and loving, and it wants to travel and learn and be out there and experience culture in other places. And Venus opposed Mars isn't a terrible aspect. It can create a lot of friction, but it can also create separations, and sometimes a little bit of, like, absence makes the heart grow fonder. There can be a sense of, like, some really interesting sports events that are setting up, because that can be Mars. And some very unusual matchups and, like, playoffs, or teams behaving a certain way, and there being some, like, really good rivalries. But things get a little messy with the Venus-Mars opposition, because we're also going to see a square between the moon and also Neptune. So that, to me, that seems like something coming out in the media about conflict between men and women, or this religion and that religion, or this country and that country, and, like, some kind of conflict that's coming up. You know, it's going to be hard for there to be peace, as Mars is in a square with Neptune and also Jupiter. And I feel like even though we think that things may be calming down and there's opportunities for peace, it's very unlikely, even if we're hearing that certain, you know, countries or certain leaders are hoping for peace or praying for peace or trying to find peaceful resolutions. I think what we're actually going to find is that there is going to be conflict, and there's going to be some really dirty, underhanded things that are going on, whether that's what they're saying, what they're putting in the news, if they're trying to get certain leaders or, you know, countries to think that things are going in one direction, and then they pivot and they go in the other, and then there's, like, surprise conflict or surprise attacks, especially involving air. Airplanes is Sagittarius. Gemini is air in general, and it can be signals, so things that are having to do with signals. And all these planets that are in Pisces, which is dealing with, like, water. So you want to be paying attention to, like, what they're putting out in the media versus what they're really doing, what they're saying they're going to be doing versus what they actually do, and whether or not there are some sneaky or underhanded things that happen involving submarines, gas, oil, coastal cities. So I think we're going to hear about, like, secret, you know, like, secret Navy deployments and things that are going on that don't really hit the news until, like, a later date, unfortunately. So that is November in a nutshell. I guess the good news is, because there is good news, is that as the month goes on, the eclipse energy starts to kind of wane and it gets a little bit easier. But you want to be really paying attention to some of those T-squares that are taking place throughout the month, where there is breakdown, where there's an opportunity to kind of detox, purge, and let go, and where we're still dealing with Saturn, and Saturn is still telling us that we have a lesson to learn in regards to where Saturn is in your chart in Aquarius for the masses. Saturn's awake and it's direct. Pluto is awake and he's direct. Mars is going to be retrograde for a while, so don't bother. We won't talk about that much until January. And yeah, we have planets coming into Sagittarius. So pretty active month on tap. Because it's so chaotic, you know, I'm really dedicated to putting all of this content out. I'm going to be doing live readings every Saturday on the channel. So if you're new to my channel, I usually post a link a day or two before. We alternate weeks on Saturdays. One Saturday we'll be doing tarot, another Saturday we'll do live astrology readings. But you can always check that out on my community tab. I'll be posting about that if you want to join me. I am booked for personal readings until February of 2023. But if you'd like to get a reading or get on my wait list, click the links below. You can go to my website at beyondtheveiledtarot.com and you can get a session on the books with me. And for those of you guys who don't have them, join me on Saturday nights, 7:00 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. If you have a question that can't wait, or if you just want to hang out on a Saturday night, learn a little bit more about tarot or astrology and get a discounted reading and be able to join me. Couple things that I want to let you guys know that's new that's coming on my website as well. We're going to be doing Astro 201 signups pretty soon. I will be teaching my second beginner's level for astrology starting in January of 2023. The date is yet to be released. We're going to release that information this month. But if you took Astro 101 and you want to go to the next level, I would love to see you if you want to work with me. It'll be like 8 classes live on Zoom over this period of several weeks. We're going to work together and learn about lunar returns, solar returns, predictive methods in astrology, a little bit more about relationships and synastry, and also we're going to start looking at transits and learning how to put all that information together with a natal chart to be able to make predictions in terms of what's coming. So if that interests you, do be on the lookout for that. You can go to my website and you can join my newsletter so you're alerted as to when this stuff comes out. I will be having a Black Friday sale on my website. So it'll be like probably Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. We're going to discount all of my pre-existing classes that are on my website. So there's stuff there that's on beginner's tarot, beginner's astrology. We also have a bunch of webinars. So if you want to get any of those at a discounted rate, you can. We will be discounting Astro 201 pretty significantly. It will be the most affordable that you can get it. So stay tuned for that because we're going to start having signups for those of you guys who want to jump on there. We also have a new astrology calendar that's coming out. We're just waiting on the prints to come back. We're going to let you guys know when it's available on the website. I've designed a whole calendar for 2023. All of the transits on the calendar, along with crystal, herbal, and like ritual recommendations for each and every one of the 12 signs. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have a physical copy and a digital copy. So depending on which one you would prefer, you'll be able to pick that up on the website as well. And don't forget to stay tuned for my podcast that I do with my partner in crime, Mike the Peace Dealer. Every Monday, we have a new podcast that comes out on the Midheaven podcast. So if you want something that's a little silly, a little bit more fun, current events and comedy and astrology, check that out. It's also on my channel under the Midheaven podcast. Okay. Good luck, guys. Godspeed. It looks like it's going to be a very colorful month ahead. Obviously, I will be back intermittently throughout the month. We'll break down some of these transits as they're happening in real time. You will also be getting all of your new moons and your full moon reports throughout the month. And yeah, let me know. If you're new to my channel, leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. You can share this with other people and let me know where you're tuning in from. We've seen so much growth. I think I said this on my horoscopes, but my birthday is on November 11th. And my goal was to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year. We're on track to do that, definitely. We might even be a little bit more, but if you guys want to help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers by my birthday, that would be awesome. So do make sure that you're subscribed so that way you're alerted as to when we have new videos coming out. We have videos that are coming out every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, if you include Saturday being the live readings. But yeah, the more support that we get, the more traction with the channel, commenting, liking, and sharing it with other people, it's getting into YouTube's algorithm, so the channel is growing, which is allowing me the freedom to be able to create more content. So all of this is available primarily because of your guys' interaction with the channel and those of you guys who donate or those of you guys who join my membership. So just a big thank you for everyone who's done that. You guys are the best, and I will see you soon. Enjoy the month of November. Take care.